Hello, and welcome to today's podcast. Whether you've experienced loss recently or long ago, grief has a way of lingering in our lives, and no matter how prepared we think we are, it is never easy. But there are some truths and practices that can help us navigate this difficult journey with more understanding and compassion for ourselves. In today's episode, we're going to dive into a few of the complexities of grief and what the basic key is to help you navigate through this season in your life. We'll also talk about the importance of honoring your own path while finding ways to cope and heal. My hope is that by the end of each brief podcast, you'll leave with some understanding, peace of mind, and knowing that you're not alone in this. First, let's talk about understanding our own personal grief. There are two very important factors. First and foremost, there is the issue of clarity. It's so important that although we're hurting and our hearts are broken, that there is clarity in our minds, that we realize that we are normal and that we are grieving. And this is why sometimes we experience things that we don't understand. But if we learn the clarity in it, if we grasp the clarity, the fact that we are grieving, we're able to balance our emotions, we're able to balance our thoughts, we're able to understand ourselves a little bit better, and it helps us navigate. Number two, it's important to remember that we all experience grief differently. Please don't try to compare yourself with one of your relatives or with a friend or someone else that's grieving. It won't work. You absolutely have to understand that you are your own person, and the way that you experience grief is your way, and no one can tell you how to do that. Comparing yourself to a family member or the way someone else expresses their emotions is not realistic or fair to yourself. Some of us may shed tears at the mere mention of our loved one's name, while others may seem stoic or deeply reflective. Everyone's different. But this doesn't mean one person is grieving more or less than the other. Why? Again, because each of us processes loss uniquely, based on our experiences, on our relationships, and our emotional makeup. What's important is that we give ourselves permission to grieve organically, without judgment. Allow yourself, if you wake up one morning and feel like just crying all day, allow yourself to cry. Allow yourself to feel what it is that you're feeling. And don't compare yourself to anyone else. For example, you may have heard of the 5 stages of grief that are proposed by psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. These stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. These stages are often discussed as though they happen in a neat chronological order, but the reality is far more complex. The stages of grief are nonlinear. It's a nonlinear journey. What happens is these feelings do not come and go in chronological order. And sometimes people that are grieving will think that they're going backwards instead of getting better. The fact of the matter is that, again, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance can happen at different times during the time that you're navigating your way through the grief. So you might feel denial at first, and you might feel a little bit of sadness and depression, and then all of a sudden that sadness and depression turns into anger, and it doesn't happen in the chronological order that you've been given. And is that normal? Yes. And why is that important? Because clarity is important. Because you want to realize that you are normal, that you are just grieving, and you're going to go up and down, and you're going to feel different things. And so it's very important to understand that, number one. Number two, each of these stages has layers of other emotions, other feelings that come with it. So in other words, if you're feeling sad one day, and depressed one day, that may turn into anger, and you may think, oh, I'm going backwards. You're not going backwards. You're grieving, and you're bringing clarity to what you're feeling so that it's healthy and so that you can speak to yourself and say, I am navigating this and I am grieving. My heart is broken, and that's why I'm all over the map. But it doesn't mean, every time, there are many times I talk to people and they will think that they need medication because their emotions are all over the map. That's what happens to us as human beings when we are grieving the loss of someone we love and our whole life has been turned upside down. Naturally, you're going to feel these different layers of feelings. So anger might not just stay with anger. It might have like 5 layers of, you might feel isolated. You might feel lonely. You might feel, along with the sadness, start to feel like you don't feel like getting out of bed that day. Is that normal? Absolutely. You're grieving. That's why it's so important to understand. Clarity is so important. You are normal and you're not alone. Emotions during grief can be like a whirlwind. Let's never forget that. And it drags us into multiple directions. For example, if you're upset with a family member who wasn't present during the most difficult times of your loved one's illness, that anger may evolve into resentment or deep hurt, and you start to allow your mind to go all over the map. You start thinking about all these different things, and you start to feel all these different emotions. Is it normal? Clarity, yes, it is. It's common to feel abandoned or betrayed when others don't show up in the ways we need them to. That's another example. But and I'm gonna speak to this in another podcast. People don't know how to handle life and death. And so people get awkward. They do awkward things. They may even, try not to talk to you much about it and it may seem like they're avoiding the conversation. And quite frankly, sometimes they are because they don't know how to handle it. It's very normal. So always remember, family dynamics can intensify emotions, especially around loss. That's very important. Let's talk about depression for a minute. While I'll address this more in upcoming episodes, it's worth noting over and over that sadness and depression are not always the same. In other words, you can have a sad day. It doesn't mean you're depressed. There's a difference. And there's a difference feeling depression, if you will, one day, or not feeling like you want to do anything one day and knowing that you're not only sad, but you're depressed that day. And maybe that lasts 3 days. Is that chronic? No. You're grieving. That's what's happening to you. Now, if this lasts 2 weeks and you don't want to take a shower and you don't want to eat and you're not sleeping, then it's chronic. Then we got to look at that. But if you're sad and you are struggling with depressed days, that does not mean it's chronic. It means you're normal. It means you're hurting. It means your heart is broken. Don't ever forget that. And people that don't understand that may try to diagnose you in their dialogue. Don't allow that to happen. Give yourself permission to feel what you're feeling. It's so important. Sadness is a normal response to loss. And when it lingers and deepens, it can turn into depression. It's important to differentiate between the two and seek support when it's necessary. If left unaddressed, chronic sadness can evolve into chronic depression, which can make your grief journey even harder. So we want to remember that. We want to learn to navigate the waves that come with grief. The truth is, when you're grieving, your emotions can fluctuate rapidly. It can be from one minute. And I remember when my parents passed, there were times I'd be laughing with family, and then I'd go to the restroom and find myself weeping in the restroom. From one moment to the other, I was laughing with family, and then I went to the restroom and I found myself weeping. Is that normal? Yes. Was it important for me to bring clarity to it? Absolutely. Why? Because I'm grieving, and I have to know that I'm normal. So one minute you may feel anger, the next profound sadness, and the next a fleeting moment of acceptance. I got to move on with life. Are you normal? Yes. Grief doesn't follow a tidy path. It's like the ocean with waves that can crash into you at any time. When a certain song plays, when you pass by a familiar place, or when you find yourself in the quiet of your own thoughts, it can really do a number on you. This unpredictability is part of the grief process, and it's absolutely normal. What's essential is that you give yourself the space to feel what you need to feel without pushing it down or holding it in. So here are a few takeaways to remember as you navigate your own grief. Number 1, expect to be overwhelmed by emotions sometimes, and sometimes all at once. This is a normal part of grieving, and it's important that we bring clarity to it. Number 2, never compare your grief to anyone else's. Grief is deeply personal, and the way you express it is valid, no matter how different it may look from others. Number 3, grief comes in waves, and it can hit you when you least expect it. But these waves are part of your healing. Number 4, don't hold on to others' behavior. People may not always respond to your grief the way you want or expect, but holding onto resentment only adds more weight to your heart. Number 5, finally, you will make it through this. It may not feel like it right now, but there is hope on the other side of grief. The important thing to do is to bring clarity to what you are feeling so that you realize that what you are feeling and experiencing is normal in grief. Are there times we need a little more help with this? Absolutely. That's why I'm hoping that these podcasts will help you. There's more to come for you. And in any of those in your immediate circle that may need this, tell them about it. In closing, thank you for joining me today. I hope that something I've shared has resonated with you and that you leave our time with a bit more clarity and understanding of your grief process. Remember, you don't have to go through this alone. Quality grief counseling, support groups, and self-care are powerful tools to help you cope and heal. If you'd like to learn more or stay connected, I invite you to visit my website, soulsynergynetwork.com, where you can leave your email and receive future insights and resources. You will also get information on our virtual grief group schedule, which will be very reasonably priced for everyone in the event you are interested. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, your grief is valid, your journey is personal, and you are never alone. God bless you.